What's up guys, my name is Lex Veldhuis and welcome to another episode of Poker Coaching. Today we're going to look at a hand with 4 of a kind and also a massive bubble spot in a $1,000 high roller. Let's take a look. Now, think about this. I'm in the big blinds. Who's the one stack that can bluff this board is the big blind, right? There is a very known bluffing mechanic around the sevens. So they bet into the big blinds, 80 big blinds deep, 80 big blinds deep, right? They bet into 2. The button calls. The small blind has 7-6 suited, 8-7 suited, 7-8 suited, etc. So they raise because they know I also have a lot of 7x, right? They could also be raising some king queen, some ace queen that they flatted, of course. So what do? Queen jack, fold. King queen, fold. And what bad hands do I call with that are air? Give me one. Give me one hand where I call with that they're not like, oh my motherfucking god. You can't give me any. So what's the only thing I can do here? How's the only way I can bluff on this board in this situation? Click it back.
All right, let's get straight into this hand. So we've got pocket sevens here. Looks like a big multi-way pot, 4 ways. Flop pretty good. I think we're pretty standard so far. In position bets a quarter. Button calls. We get a squeeze. So what are you thinking about at this point?
Okay, so at this point, I'm kind of thinking sort of bluffs forward, right? Because I feel whenever you have quads or some insane nuts, the best way that is also like very visible on the board, right? The best way I feel to play it is to make sure I play it in at least a way where I could have bluffs. So what I was thinking about this spot is like, you have a pre-flop raise that opens, a button that calls, and a small blind that raises. If I have king queen here, I'm just folding.
Yep, I agree.
So in my eyes, the only way that if I want to be able, and I can, right? Because I have still the most sevens out of anybody, no matter what these guys do. Like even if they all shove, I'll have the most sevens, right? So whatever happens, I'll have the most sevens. If I want to do anything, let's say I have a hand like, I don't know, king 8 of hearts or something, or even like 8-9 of hearts, because I might really need some 5-card potential over multiple streets when I make a play this. But then the best thing to do is just to be click it here. And that's the only way I'm going to win the hand, right? To exercise my 7 advantage. And I feel once I flat, I'm never going to flat with 8-9 of hearts. I'm not even going to flat with a queen. So I honestly feel that the moment I flat this hand, I'm just saying to everybody, hey, I have a 7. Please do something crazy.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. So I do think that you're right that the only way to really represent that you have a range that's got air in it is probably to 3-bet. I think that if you check this in a solver, I guess this would be a 4-bet. I think if you check this in a solver, it's probably reasonable. It might even be the only play. Like it might just be like, if you want to continue, you have to raise. So I think that's reasonable. I think against human opponents, you might still be better off hoping that they make a mistake because and flatting. And the reason I say that is because because this hand is quads. I just don't know if you make more I don't know if you make more money waiting for your opponents to have a hand that they actually can't fold. That they don't like, for example,
yeah.
There's not that much EV in the raising component when you have quads. I mean, obviously you can't core them with a 7. So you need someone to tool out with a pair of queens, kings, or aces. Obviously, if they have 2 queens in their hand, then you lose, right? So you need someone. Sorry, you don't lose. So I apologize, but you're gonna get all the money regardless. Like if they have 2 queens, if Coda 777 has two queens, there's nothing you can do. I don't think to screw this up and get all his money. So I think that there's the possibility that you don't get any EV out of either tree, really, like at equilibrium. So you play the tree that makes you the most money against people that might make a mistake, which I think would probably be calling. That's not the way that I've coached you so far, but that's only because I think that neither tree is worth almost anything to you. Like that's just my opinion. Like I think that if you raise and then you bet the turn and then you jam the river, you don't get called by anything except, realistically speaking, you don't get called by someone who thinks you're bluffing. I just don't think so. And I think that if you flat, I don't really think that anybody thinks you have much other than a 7. So I don't think you get much EV out of either tree, no matter what you do when you VPip here. But if you have this hand and the turn is a queen, and you
Yeah.
pretend like you had a 7, you'll make a lot of money. If you flat here and the run out is like, I don't know, king 10, and someone has ace jack, I think you make a lot of money. If you flat here and the turn's jack and the river's 10, and someone has ace king, I think you make a lot of money. Yeah, like I think that's by the way, that's not a great plan, but I just don't think either tree here is worth much to you. So I'm fine with going with the way that like gives people the highest probability of hanging themselves, essentially.
Yeah.
But everything you said is theoretically reasonable. So just so you know, everything you said is theoretically reasonable. Like you probably have to continue here by 3-betting because it's the only way that you can really bluff. If you want to bluff.
Maybe it's maybe the clicking it back, because this is in a bounty 162. Maybe the clicking it back, because I was so convinced. Like my chat was so adamant about me being a moron, you know, and I was so convinced that theoretically this should be the right play, because this is the only way I keep some sort of balance alive. But maybe I should keep that in a 10K versus Ape Styles and Lena and whatever, where they might think like, I'm not gonna let this guy fuck with me or something, you know?
Yeah. That even,
or at least they realize I'll have some sort of bluff component, and they need to have at least a call or something.
Yeah, I mean, some of them would just probably continue. Like even them would probably be really dense 7x, particularly after this street. Like you might make the 400, but when you start barreling down, they're going to be pretty dense 7x for continuing. Just because like no one's range is going to be really wide here. Like everyone's range is going to be tight. So
that's true, because like from their perspective, the moment like they look insanely strong when they raise this flop or call this flop and then call my click back as well. I thin their range very, very much the same way.
Yeah, I mean, like exactly. That's my concern is that like everyone's range gets really tight here. What's really tight? A 7. What do they not have when you have 2 7s? A 7. So like, there's just no way to make any money. And that's basically my conclusion. I think there's no way to make any money, no matter what you do. This is probably theoretically better, but oh well. I probably call anyway, especially against people I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. All right, that's good enough. That's good enough. Okay, that's good. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Too bad,
Awesome.
but yeah, I know. I see what you're saying. You're right. It's like this is definitely one of the times where the practical situation trumps the sort of like theoretical thinking in that sense.
I think so.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Really interesting example of the theory not always stacking up with what might practically be the best. So good lesson for me there. Let's not count out human error. Now, next hand is going to be from a big spot, $1,000 high roller with a really aggressive opponent. Let's jump into it. You viewing figures match Twitch? No, not yet. Not yet, but I'm happy though. Obviously hoping for folds, but it's still fine. We still beat some straight draws, some worse, some ace highs that we now beat, of course, as well.
All right, let's get straight into it. Let's go. So we open up the button. And we open up the button, and these stacks are pretty relevant, right?
Yeah, so it's 2 spots off the money in a $1,000 tournament. Now seeing this hand, I mean, it's a pretty big 1K. It's not necessarily like, you know, only 12 people left kind of 1K, and I kind of feel, looking at the hand, I would normally just jam versus active blinds actually, but I kind of feel like on the bubble that's a bit too loose.
Yeah, I don't expect there to be any shoving here at this stacked up pre-flop. I don't think that that's going to work. I know that it feels like it should work, but I don't. It is profitable, but I don't think that that's going to be the way that it's recommended to play a range. So I like the open. You end up being, you end up using a tight opening range here. You're into 2 stacks to cover, close to the money bubble, with a very healthy stack, very short stacks to the table. So you're going to be tight, but I still think that this hand that you're going to have an opening range, and this hand is always going to find its way into it because the suited ace X block is one of the most valuable components of your weaker hands. So I think that this is a good line to take so far.
Okay.
Big blind calls and big blind checks. So what are you thinking about now?
Well, I think I want to pure c-bet this in this spot pretty much, because I think that lots of stronger hands, especially seeing he covers me on the bubble. Lots of stronger hands around the queen and jack. He's just gonna jam pre-flop or make some like 5.5, 6 big blind raise out of position. I think that I have a big advantage, and you know, obviously my opening range is gonna be a little bit more snug around this time, and a lot of so I have more, you know, that gives more weight in my range to the Broadway part. So I just wanna c-bet this a lot, and I think that this hand is pretty good because it still can get some value, but it also needs some protection. So
Okay. Not so much. So that's a very like chips oriented way of thinking, in the sense that, you know, the idea of c-betting a lot. This hand can bet. Like, I'm not saying this hand can't bet, but this hand will also check a lot. So like a lot. So like probably mostly. So it's a complicated situation this deep, but essentially the like the baseline is that triggers kind of like my identification that what you said is not accurate, is when you said like I'm going to be c-betting a lot. You're not really going to be c-betting a lot because you're going to be c-betting with a polarized range. So you're not going to want to c-bet with Jack X, which automatically means that it's very different from chips, right? So in chips, you c-bet here with with a large fraction of your range because you're in chips. When you're in a dense ICM adjusted scenario, you're trying to minimize investing a lot of money and bluff catching in big scenarios with basically like medium strength hands. You just kind of try to avoid that tree altogether. Where if you're in chips, if it makes money, you call. Like if he's bluffing too much, you just call. It's no problem, right? So it's a little bit more complicated here, where you're not really trying to like, let's say if you bet range on the flop and he tools out a lot, so he goes crazy. That's actually not really great for you, right? Because like there's still ICM just because you hit the flop now, right? There was ICM pre-flop that made you consider jamming this hand. That's still true on the flop. So you don't play a wide range pre-flop, right? You don't open a wide range pre-flop because you can't handle much pressure. You don't c-bet a wide range on the flop for the same reasons. Yeah, so basically we're going like anytime you're in these really kind of high pressure ICM scenarios, if you're covered by the other player, you should be using a more polarized c-bet strategy, or at least be prepared to use a more polarized c-bet strategy in a number of scenarios. This one included, even though you're on the button and you're uncapped and you're a tighter opening range and he's, you know, blah blah blah. Like you still have to be more polar. So that results in a lot of your Jack X no kicker is going to be a check. Queen X no kicker is going to be a check. Some fraction of sets should probably be checks, so that if he decides, especially if you think that if this is a high stakes player, you're going to catch overbets on the turn, or you're going to catch significant investment on the turn, you should be relatively indifferent between betting and checking strong hands on the flop. Yeah, and as a result, this hand was basically won't bet all the time. It's not bad to bet it. It's not stupid, but this hand won't bet all the time.
okay.
Guess we bet we get called. It's good. And we're not going to bet again. So I think that's pretty intuitive for most people. Okay, so now what?
Well, okay, so I thought that my hand is really good for bluff catching, but after hearing you say that I should be checking a lot in this scenario, that actually leads me to believe that I'll get to the river with a lot more Jack X, etc. than I thought I would, which is obviously going to be higher in my range. I just felt so much like the fact that I overbet means that I'm going to have to defend a whole lot less, right? I felt like this hand was perfect because I don't have a king 10 or 9 in it. So, you know, in that sense, I even beat some ace highs that think like, I don't want to lose to a pair of 4s. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That might bet the river. So, I don't know. I felt the hand was really good for hero calling. The size threw me off a little bit because I feel like, you know, obviously my calling range gets a lot smaller. And hearing you talk about the fact that I should actually be taking a lot of Jack X, Queen X to the river, then, you know, maybe a hand like Queen 9 suited or something is perfect to check back a street with and then call it off or something, you know, or some of my Jack X. So I'm not so sure now.
Sure. Basically, everything you said is accurate. So you get to the river, and he uses a bet size that's very polarizing, which means that, you know, if he's bluffing, you win. If he's not bluffing, you lose, and you lose in a big way. He's probably going to have a pretty strong hand for doing this. This hand's probably worth around 0 because it's such a good bluff catcher, right? So if you map to where your opponent's bluffs are likely to come from, they are likely to contain a king 10 or 9. maybe to a lesser extent an 8. So hero calling with those hands, even if you have a jack, like Jack 10, King Jack, Jack 9, those don't sound like great hero calls on the river to me. So I'd probably fold those, and I would probably fold those ahead of this hand, even though it's a pair of jacks. So because your opponent's not value betting a pair of jacks, right? So the absolute hand strength only matters if you can beat his value bets, and then after that we're just talking about blockers. So if you think your opponent's more likely to have 2 pair with a jack than a 3, a jack is still relevant, right? Which is maybe that's reasonable. But like maybe your opponent's more likely to have Jack 5 than 5-3. Maybe your opponent's more likely to have Jack Deuce than 3 Deuce. So that's not unreasonable, but it's not that significant. Like it's not overwhelmingly significant because I think that's close. I think the blocker value between a 3 and a jack is somewhat comparable or competitive. So I would still fold the worst jacks, like King Jack, Jack 10, Jack 9, Jack 8. This is a pretty good bluff catcher, so you could probably call with it sometimes. But you should have a pair of queens here, which is what you said, Queen 9, right? And that is going to be a far more significant fraction of the calling range than hands like this. So yeah, your reasoning is also right, which is like, oh, I'm supposed to be more polarized here. Therefore, I'm supposed to be more uncapped here. Therefore, I don't have to hero call as much. That whole line of reasoning is correct.
Yeah, okay, so probably versus this sizing, just really gravitate towards a hand like maybe Jack 7 suited or Queen X or something.
Yes, that's correct. And yeah, just stick with what you're doing, which is that, like, have an appreciation for the fact that if you get to the river with stronger hands, you don't have to hero call as much. So that this is a great reflection of that. Like, your job is supposed to be, okay, I have to be able to handle heat in different ways than normal. Because my opponent's supposed to put the money in. Case in point, that's what he did, right? Like, you're on the bubble, so the other guy is going to lean on you. So be prepared for that. And the way that you prepare for the other guy to lean on you is don't try to shovel all of your strong hands into the betting lines. Just be patient and trust that he will shove the money into the betting lines because that's what he needs to do. It's the bubble. He's supposed to put pressure on you. Let him.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Because then it becomes, I think that people are generally very scared to bet when they feel it's a marginal spot to bet or something, and but it actually just makes you a lot more money. And it's kind of funny because in game I remember thinking about this hand and I was just thinking like, oh my god, this hand feels so perfect to bluff catch, but there was something subconsciously where I was just like, but not here, and then it makes perfect sense now, so like I think I had the right feeling, I just couldn't put it into words or theory. But it's the fact that it is the bubble, and I mean it's funny because I present this spot to you as like, hey, we're 2 off the money, which definitely seems significant to me, right? And yeah, okay, so that works out. Okay, that's super interesting. That makes me feel a lot better about the hand as well.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you. All right.
No problem.
Thanks again to Mr. Jordan from BBC. If you have another question, make sure you drop them down in the comments below. He has been getting back to a lot of people. Of course, the links to BBC Poker are going to be in my description. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you want to watch more of the content and want to get notified. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.